We'll take this in all sorts of directions. I want to start with Kingy. He's a massive advocate for the mid-season trade period. Patrick Dangerfield has said that he would be open to it in coming years. So, question for you, Kingy. What is a hypothetical mid-season trade that works right now for a couple of clubs?
Jeremy McGovern from the West Coast Eagles to the Western Bulldogs.
Wow. In return for?
Well, whatever they get is a bonus for the rebuild. So say they get their first-round pick, the Dogs' first-round pick, which would be closer to pick sort of 15 than 1. So pick 15 for Jeremy McGovern right now. The wage this year stays with the Eagles because it's already allocated, and then the Dogs have to pick it up next year. So what it does do, it squeezes their cap next year, and it obviously takes away a first-round pick. So it basically limits their top-of-the-table time, and it sort of hastens the rebuild at the bottom for the West Coast Eagles. So it will create more movement.
I love it. He's 30. Would you give up? So it's going to be about pick, I don't know, about pick 10 in the draft, probably, with where they're at right now, the Western Bulldogs, although they could go higher. Would you do their first-round pick for McGovern to chase a premiership right now?
See, if it were me running the AFL, I would set the national draft selections now, the format now. At the mid-year point, bang, that's our draft order, set. So there's no tanking from here on in. Yep. There's no need to tank because the draft order is set. Okay, so you know exactly what pick you're trading for, and you know exactly what talent you're getting, and you just play the back half of the year. Everyone will hate finishing last if you set the draft order at the halfway mark.
Pick 11 for Jeremy McGovern. Western Bulldogs fans, mid-season trade, if it was in, would you do that? I'm sure Luke Beveridge would do it.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder whether Sam Powell, their list manager, would do it and how involved coaches would get that are chasing a premiership right now. And if you've got a hypothetical one for us, send it through 0433 98 11 16. What's on your agenda?
Have you got one? You have a think about one. See if you can find one for me. Big men that don't play big. What's the function of a ruckman who doesn't win contested possession and clearance?
Name names.
Well, Tristan Sherry hasn't won a contested possession for 2 weeks and hasn't won a clearance for 3. I don't understand what function you play in the team as a big man if you don't play big. We saw Riley O'Brien go back to the Sandful, reset, reprogram, get a stack of footy, come back into the team. There's no shame in it. But if your big man's not playing big, I think it permeates through your team really quickly.
So how do you view Larky? So I'm assuming you're alluding more to the ruckman and those big guys, but he had 2 touches on the weekend. Now, I did that game. A lot of it's not his fault. But I guarantee you, Kingy, if I put you out on a footy field, you'd get me more than 2 touches. Right now, you'd get me more than 2. So there has to be something in it for him. I think he drops more marks than any player in the competition, Nick Larky. How are you viewing his...
Marks.
You watch, the ball hits his hands and falls to ground more than any player in the competition. I've been watching that for a while. How are you viewing his development in what is a really poor side, albeit?
He's a non-pressuring tall forward, which is a bad starting point. He's competing 2v1, but you know what? That's the gig. He has to do more. Simple as that. I keep saying it. He's the most important part of this rebuild. If he fails, the rebuild fails. Because there's no other tall forward option on that list right now. Charlie Comben they keep talking about, but hey, he's unsighted, so you wouldn't know.
Whilst we're on North Melbourne, what are you hearing about Horne Francis? I'm hearing bits and pieces. Ross Lyon on Footy Classified talks about his body language. Tom Brown, I think on Triple M, said something about Zeeble having a conversation with him. Once again, I was at that game. He did look incredibly frustrated. He didn't look engaged. That was the feel. He didn't look engaged with the group. The trip to Adelaide, the contract talks, the coach being too hard on the players. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. There's a lot of little things that might add up to big things. Could he leave or not? Surely not.
I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't. I'm not, before Caro or yourself bringing up on Classified, I don't know, right?
Well, you haven't
I don't
spoken
know.
to his manager recently?
No, I haven't.
His family,
I'll tell you what the challenge for his manager is, okay? So if you're just picture yourself as Jason's manager at the moment.
Ben Williams, yep.
Ben Williams, okay, and you're saying that he'll be the highest paid second or third year player in the competition's history.
In history, yep.
So history shows us that that's north of $1 million a year. So if you're going to have a young player extracted from the Kangaroos to go to one of the South Australian teams, call it Adelaide, okay, on more than $1 million a year at 19 years of age on a long-term deal, can you imagine the pressure that you are putting a young man under in that circumstance. You will judge his games every week. You've already been strong on the long-term deal at the big rate.
It's remember the pressure that Boyd was under?
Yeah.
Tom Boyd. It's that type of pressure. And
So what's the role of the manager, I guess, is my question. Is it to look after the client to help him play his best footy or to get sheer finance?
Well, I think he's going to get paid well wherever. If he stays, he's going to get paid well. I mean, we're going to be the difference between a couple of 100,000. You take your tax out, it's not that much probably. So I think that he's going to be well paid regardless. But it is his best footy environment North Melbourne? That's what the manager would have to ask. Or is it Adelaide? Or is it someone else?
The environment, I'm not too concerned. I'm just thinking about the pressure on this guy. If you're drafted somewhere at pick 1 and you stay, and I'm not mounting a case for North. We have no bearings. So please don't come at me. If he's drafted at pick 1, it gets the big contract, he stays and he plays, and it doesn't quite work out. I don't think there's a big downside to that. Okay, that's happened forever and a day. Or if he progresses on and becomes a top liner, fantastic. But if he leaves, I think it's a different conversation, the pressure you take with you to that next club who would have to give up significant salary cap and tenure and also some draft picks. We're talking about Dylan Shield all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about Darcy Moore. You write about him regularly. You talk about Brodie Grundy. You assess those games tougher than the average player.
Yep. No, all right. Have you say on that, Horne Francis, would the pressure be too extreme if he left for money at the end of this year? Hutchie saying North Melbourne should look at offers at the end of this year, not just next year. Would it be too much for him? What else you got?
I want to ask you. So on Sunday we've got Nathan Fyfe's going to play. He's going to play in the Waffle.
Yeah.
I just wonder if we didn't have the sub, right? If we had 5 positions on the bench and you wanted Nathan to play 60 minutes of football, would you find a way to just orchestrate 60 minutes of football with that 5th bench position? Rather than, because you can't use the sub now for a management scenario. You can't have Nathan play, 60 minutes in the first half and then sub him out of the game because that's against the rules.
Yeah. Well, and if you sub, you got to be prepared to play the whole game, because if a player goes down early, you're going to be required for them to play, a large percentage of the game. Otherwise, you're one down. So
I'm saying start on, then be subbed out.
Yeah. So you're suggesting just scrap the sub and just make it 5 on the bench.
Yeah. And just take away all the nonsense that goes with it. The discussion of will he play next week? Is he going to get a doctor's certificate? All this sort of rubbish. That's gone. It's just being used in a different manner now. But I just wonder whether it's good for the game not having that availability for a Nathan Fyfe on. We'd love to see him come straight back in AFL footy, wouldn't we? But it doesn't allow it because of the management side of it. So I think we've set up a rule that maybe hurts us.
I've got a hypothetical trade for you as well, and a lot of texts coming through on this. Very simply, Todd Goldstein to Geelong for a late second-round pick. You're not going to get a second-round pick for Todd Goldstein at the end of the year, so it definitely works for North Melbourne. They're going to cash in.
Second.
Yeah, I reckon you'd get.
Pick 50.
No,
You're not doing
late second. So let's talk. So 18th. Let's talk 30, 35, 36. A pick 36 for Todd Goldstein.
Yeah,
would you do that if you're Geelong? Would you do it? You definitely do it if you're North, because he's probably going to leave for less at the end of the year anyway. 33, 34 years of age.
Or does he stay and become a 300 gamer?
Yeah, well, that's the debate, isn't it? If you've got one for us, a mid-season hypothetical trade, Dangerfield wants it. Kingy's been a big advocate for it. How would it look